I'm to the point where if there is a controversial episode, I don't even read the comments. Pushback to me is a part of the gig. If you think that you're going to put yourself out there on a platform and gain followers and gain people who love your work and you're not going to get pushback, you're being delusional.
What I find interesting as a human is going past what you believe your potential is and continuing to raise that bar further and further, not just from a financial perspective, but, can you get healthier? Can you get smarter? Can you get better? Can you, build a bigger thing? And I think continuously challenging yourself is what makes me excited about life.
I like characters. So like a Kathy Hilton, give me that all day long. I could have podcasted with her for 5 hours. I love people who are colorful and quirky. I like to sort of cast the podcast like I would cast a dinner party.
Welcome to More to Say. I'm Amber Vinsbox, founder of the $2 billion creator commerce platform, LTK. I've spent the last 14 years pioneering the creator economy. And on this podcast, I'm giving you direct access to the knowledge and perspectives of some of today's most influential people. I want you to stay ahead of the curve, so pull up a seat because we are just getting started. I am so excited to welcome my friends Lauryn and Michael Bosstick on More to Say. They are the dynamic duo behind the massively successful podcast, The Skinny Confidential, Him and Her, with over 200 million downloads. Together, they've built an empire from the ground up, sharing their candid conversations on business, relationships, and personal growth. Lauryn is a multi-hyphenate entrepreneur, podcaster, investor, best-selling author, and the creator behind wellness and beauty brand The Skinny Confidential. In 2021, she released her first products, an ice roller and a face oil. She has continued to disrupt the industry with a line of wellness and beauty products driven by her community love. These products repeatedly sell out. You have undoubtedly seen them. She is also the author of 2 books, The Skinny Confidential, a babe's sexy, sassy fitness and lifestyle guide, and the new national bestseller, Get the F Out of the Sun, an in-your-face preventative skincare Bible with routines, products, tips, and insider secrets from 100 of the world's best skincare gurus. Lauryn and I first met because she was an early user of LTK. We met in person when she earned her way to LTKCon, and she asked me for an interview on her blog. At the time, she had a wellness blog and had just released that first book. She asked me for health tips, and at the time, I was really focused on my career, so much less health. So the hot tip that I gave her was to drink Diet Dr. Pepper as opposed to the fully leaded sugared version. We've both come a long way. We've both gotten married, had children, and I'm so excited that Michael, her husband, is going to join us today. Michael is the CEO and co-founder of the Dear Media Podcast Network. It's the largest female marketplace in audio, and it's revolutionizing the podcast world. They started early. In 2016, Michael and Lauryn launched the Skinny Confidential Him and Her podcast, which has become one of the top podcasts in the world. So today we'll be diving into their journey, the business of podcasting, what the future holds for Dear Media, and so much more. Welcome to More to Say, Lauryn and Michael. This conversation today was really triggered because most recently I was on y'all's podcast, Him and Her, and the whole time we were talking, I was just thinking how articulate and thoughtful, candid, strategic, hardworking, and unique you guys are as a couple. And honestly, I just wanted to roll right into a dinner conversation with a glass of wine. And so I wanted to have you guys on the podcast today to sort of do that in front of a larger audience. So thank you guys for agreeing to that and joining me here on my baby podcast with you guys as the varsity podcasters.
Thank you for having us. It's such an honor.
Thank you. No, and we can end the show right there. All those nice things you said. I think that's good for us.
He loves the compliment.
No, but thank you, honestly.
This is my first time having both of you on, so I'm going to do my best with having a conversation with both of you. You both have so much to offer. I know you launched Him and Her podcast in 2016. 8 years ago. To me, that was long before podcasting was mainstream. You were already in so many channels. I know with your blog, you had your YouTube, of course, your social media accounts. What inspired you guys to get into podcasting?
I have to give Michael credit for this. It's really tough.
Whoa, blow that one up.
It's really tough, but I do have to give him credit. Essentially, I had the blog. I had started it like 13 years ago. It was going 7 years up. I was blogging every single day. I was gaining success, and I started to realize that people were also interested in Michael's perspective. I kind of had turned the camera on him because I had massive jaw surgery, and I was like so swollen and bloated in the face that I was like, I'm going to put Michael on blast. And people fell in love with him as a character too. So one day we were in Cabo having margaritas, ginger margaritas, and he said, let's start a podcast. And the second that he said that to me, I remember it was a eureka moment. It was like, this makes so much sense for not only me as a creator, but for what I like to do. It's just very true to me to talk on a mic. It feels very organic and authentic. This is at a time that podcasts were not popular. You literally had to teach people how to go to a podcast app. And we kind of just started it like threw silly putty at a wall to see what would stick. And we did it out of our house with his sister on a mic, horrible recording, horrible audio, no good guests. And we just did it week after week after week. And here we are 8 years later. I think, we have almost 800 episodes. It's definitely been a slow build, but it's been really fun to do together because we do not work together on a daily basis, which a lot of people think we do. We definitely have separate careers, and we get to come together to podcast together, which is fun.
But I think at the time, Lauren had been asking me to participate in some of the channels that she was already creating on, whether it was the blog or social. And it felt strange to me. I was operating separate businesses and differently. And there was plenty of couples that started kind of creating content together on all the different social platforms. So that felt very strange to me. Like, you're never going to see me skipping and holding hands down a beach. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It just felt very like awkward for me. But we were both listening to so many podcasts, and we started, I guess, maybe before it was mainstream, but there was a lot of great creators that were doing it and who we admired. And it felt like this was something that we could do together and both bring our unique perspectives to and have it kind of be ours instead of me going into something that she had already created. Of course, we leaned into the brand and the audience that she had already built because that made sense, but it felt like something that we could do together in a unique way where it wasn't me stepping on her toes or vice versa. It's obviously been a dance, but yeah, that was really like why we started. I think we really just love the medium.
I know you guys are very thoughtful and strategic and business minded. So as you were kind of laying out this plan, was it the same audience as a Skinny Confidential audience, or did you have sort of like a wider group in mind?
I'm a big fan of appealing to what you have. I think a lot of people are always trying to get more followers, more this, more that. And I'm a fan of saying, okay, I have 10 followers. I am going to court those followers like I've never courted anyone before and let them be the influencers and go tell their friends. I think you get in trouble when you're constantly looking outside of what you already have. So for us with this podcast, we were like, let's create it for the Skinny Confidential audience and just make it so amazing that this girl is doing her makeup in the morning, getting ready for work, and her husband overhears it and asks her what she's listening to, and then he becomes a fan. So the strategy was to really focus on what we already had and have the people who were listening go sort of be the soldiers for the podcast as opposed to us trying to like find a new audience.
Yeah, I think like we knew the audience could be broadened in terms of people that maybe had like-minded interests or were resonating with the things that we say and continue to say. But we never thought of it as like, hey, this needs to become a mainstream thing and we need to go outside and grab people that, may not necessarily find interest in the platforms or the things we speak to. Like Lauren and I are very good at both understanding and knowing that we're not for everybody. And I think sometimes creators get in trouble because they want to be for everybody. And we just know inherently that that's never going to be us. And we just, I think it's enabled us to create in a very specific and certain way where we can go into content with sure footing without having to worry like, okay, is this going to upset someone or someone not going to like us? We know at any given time, anything we say is not going to be received well by everyone, but that there's a certain group of people that are going to love it and resonate with it and share it with more like-minded people. And I think that's always been the strategy. It's not grab everyone, it's grab the people that really are here and get it and appreciate what we're doing.
Did you guys have early goals around whether it was downloads or economic goals for the podcast?
I think, it was so early that honestly, like in the beginning, we keeping in mind, like it's still the side hustle, right? Like Lauren's running her businesses. I run Dear Media. But in the early days, there was very few opportunities for monetization. And we actually looked at it as a platform that would lead back to the other platforms or other commerce opportunities. We never thought that the podcast itself would become a substantial business just because nobody was doing it. I think throughout that journey around 2017, 18, we started to recognize like, okay, this medium is going to be substantial. And obviously then we created some businesses around it. But in the early days, it was really like, hey, can we just create this unique content funnel that would lead back to the other things we were doing?
I have a different answer than you on that.
That's not shocking.
I looked at it the same way I looked at my blog. I knew if I continued to provide valuable, consistent content to an audience, that the money and the listeners would come. And so I always looked at it as, yes, a business play, but also, to your point, content. Like I wanted to content market the other platforms, but definitely I knew that when you mix valuable, tangible takeaways with really smart guests on a mic, and you're saving the audience time, because that's what audio is. It's one of the only platforms and mediums that saves the audience time. They can do their nails, they can do their laundry, they can clean the kitchen while they listen. That mixture I knew was a very unique unicorn. So for me, it was just like the strategy was showing up consistently and delivering. I cannot tell you how many people have launched a podcast and they stop after 50 episodes.
Yeah, I'll give you we're saying the same thing, but I guess what I'm saying is it took 16 years for the podcast medium to reach $1 billion overall as a revenue mark, right? It took a long time for it to even hit that, which is very small compared to other mediums, whether it's YouTube or video or social or programmatic, whatever it is. It's like $1 billion that took 16 years to get there. And since then it is doubled and maybe now almost quadrupled. So the medium has now evolved, but in the early days, there was very few people making money in the space. And I always looked at it as like, it was going to garnish a lot of attention, but that you might have to use that attention in other ways to monetize. Obviously that's changed, but early days, it wasn't possible to make the kind of money people are now making.
You guys are definitely one of my top 1 or 2 favorite podcasts, period. And I think of you as almost like a modern version of How I Built This. I used to always love How I Built This. And then now I have new favorites. And I think it's part of it is like the access. First of all, it's your candor to me anyway, of why I listen, but then it's the access to the guest in the way that you, are inviting them to be candid as well. What do you think, like, as you guys look at casting for your podcast, what are the things that you look at to make sure that you're booking a great podcast guest?
That's a really good question. I don't think that anyone's ever asked me that. I look for a niche person that can bring something interesting to the table that they have not brought to other podcasts. So I'll give you an example. Like we just had Jay Shetty on, and a bunch of my friends text me and they said, wow, I've never heard Jay Shetty like that. And that's what I want. I want you to hear a different Jay Shetty. We had Gary Vee on. It was a different kind of episode. I don't want to go study the 5,000 interviews that Gary's been on and then ask him the same questions that he's already been asked 5,000 times. I want to bring him on, and I want the audience to feel like they're in the room with us and it's a super casual conversation. And I think what Michael and I try to do is disarm the guest, right? Like that's number one. You got to disarm the guest. These people, a lot of them have their guard up. They have PR in the room, or they want to bring PR, and they want the questions. But I think at the end of the day, they actually appreciate that the questions aren't the same old questions that they've been asked 600 times. So I try to like throw a match in, maybe something unexpected. But then at the same time, I want to make them comfortable because it's really important so they're able to open up. So it's kind of a mix for me. As far as finding the guests, I like characters. So like a Kathy Hilton, give me that all day long. I could have podcasted with her for 5 hours. Like I love people who are colorful and quirky. I like to sort of cast the podcast like I would cast a dinner party. Like maybe there's someone who is quirky, then there's someone who's super smart and super analytical, like a Brian Johnson. But then I like want to pull out a different side of him. So I'm like, okay, Brian is someone who is so smart. He's like outrageously smart, but I want to show his funny side. And then maybe someone else we have on is like someone who's really outspoken about politics. I try to cast it like you would cast a big, large table of people. You want to make sure there's different personalities. And what we do when they come in is we try to have a non-judgmental atmosphere so they open up.
Yeah, and I think like this is just advice for any aspiring podcaster or a host out there. This is coming from a long time doing this now. Like, I think it starts with Lauryn and I actually have to be interested in the person and the topics, right? Like we have turned down over the years so many, I guess, people that are on like the typical press tour, like they have a new book or they have a talking point or a new show. Like if they only want to talk about those things and there's not something that we're both interested in, then it's typically a pass. I also think to Lauren's point, like we try to have human conversations and stay away from a lot of talking points and PR points. And I think the audience appreciates that and respects it. Over the years, like I always say, like it used to be the audience was first and then the host or the guest and then the brand. But now, like in a lot of weird ways, maybe we're putting ourselves first just because to have longevity doing this for a long time, you actually have to be interested in speaking to the person. Like we've done over 700 of these. And if it was the same monotonous over and over, same kind of talking points over and over, like we would burn out a long time ago. And so, we try to create variation where sometimes someone's like, why the hell would that person ever come on the show? Or how did they get booked? And it's like, well, if we're interested in the topic and we think the audience might hear something new, then we'll typically dive into it. And I think that's like really like one of the key things of doing this for so long time is you actually have to enjoy talking to people and be curious.
I think we also try not to have an agenda, right? I'm not trying to push a political side here. I'm not trying to push a religion. I'll talk about meat all day long, but then I'll have a vegan on. And I think that, we'll have Tommy Loren on from Fox News, and then we'll have Chelsea Clinton on. And it's not also, I do want to say this, it's not also just the big name guests. Like I really enjoy a conversation with someone that maybe we're introducing the audience to. We had Michael's sister and my brother-in-law on and people loved that. There's solo episodes. Like I think it really is that bag of Chex Mix and mixing it up and you kind of don't know what you're going to get.
I mean, at this point we've had politicians, we've had drug traffickers, we've had wellness gurus, we've had,
vagina designers.
We've had entrepreneur. Really, like we've had an undercover cop and we just try to have conversations that we find interesting and that we think the audience will extract some kind of value from, whether that's some advice or a human element or something that's going to help them carry through the day or some medical advice or wellness, whatever it may be.
And Amber, your episode was so interesting because you're someone who is really built from the ground up. And I think that episode translated so well because so many people can relate to that story that you told of being at your dad's house. Like there was so many like nuggets that you could pull that where people could be like, wow, if Amber can do this, like maybe I can launch that company that's in my head. I think we love having people who have created something out of nothing on the show too.
Well, thank you for adding me to the lineup because I think my interest in you guys is actually looking at your cast. And I was like, if this is who they like, I want to have dinner with these people. And so I absolutely see what you're pulling through of like, this is actually who we're passionate about. And I see that candidly, even though I'm just a few episodes in, when the team will bring me people, I'm like, I just don't think that I care enough to have a rich conversation with that person, even though they might be culturally relevant. And so I've tried to, apply that same sort of philosophy is like, I have to genuinely be interested in what they're interested in as well. And it's interesting, you guys talking about the interviews. Baxter sort of makes fun of me because he's like, Amber, this is, more of a passion project. But he's like, I read like every interview any of my guests have ever done because I don't want to ask them the same questions. I think that you can get all of that everywhere else. And so it's a waste of my time and their time if I'm doing the same. So I'm a little bit of a savant in that. And it sounds like that's what you're pulling through. You guys, like the episodes I've listened to, I find myself taking notes. Like I've loved Gary Vee. I of course listened to that episode and I have his books and stuff, but I'm still like taking notes on it. What are some examples of things that you've left that interview and been like, this is a life-changing or this is a nugget we're bringing home?
There's so many things that we've learned from the podcast. I mean, I was just thinking this morning, we have changed our entire life moving to Texas. And a lot of the changes that we've made were tips that we've gotten from these guests.
I'll tell you even something strange. I mean, what I always say to the audience is like, we have the benefit of maybe learning earlier because we, like say we do an episode with you, we may not release it for a week or two, but we're learning at the same time. And even in a weird way, we talk about therapy and people that have had therapy on the show a lot, but it's almost been like couples therapy for Lauryn and I, because think about it. You're sitting here for hundreds and hundreds of hours talking to different experts and thought leaders that are sharing things they've gone through. And subconsciously, sometimes we're going through those same things and we can kind of hear it at the same time together in an intense kind of format where you have to really be paying attention. I think without the podcast, our marriage would not be in as healthy of a place as it is, because we've had almost in a weird way, thousands of hours of conversation. I don't want to say therapy because it's, there's licensed therapists that might take offense, but we've had all of these prolific conversations where we get to learn at the same time together. And so it's just, it's been an invaluable resource outside of the business, just being able to do it and learn from the people we have on the show.
From a micro perspective though, things that I've used to change my life are grounding, putting my feet in the grass, getting outside in the sun first thing in the morning, scraping my tongue the second I wake up so you don't swallow bacteria, cold plunging, sauna, weightlifting, prioritizing protein.
But even from a business perspective, even talking to people like yourself that are further along on the entrepreneurial path than us, like as operators, you get to hear firsthand from founders and creators, and you get to hear the things that they go through and how they did it. And it's just, like I said, you can't, like you almost, it's been like a master class. Like I don't know what kind of college could have taught us the things that this podcast has taught us over 8 years in such a wide assortment of topics, if that makes sense. Like we've literally had conversations with someone who was kidnapped by pirates in Somalia and what she did mentally to get through that. And then you have someone like Gary Vee and yourself who've built these massive billion-dollar businesses and what they've done to do. It's like, I don't even know how to articulate how much value just doing the show outside of a business has brought to our lives.
I do feel like though we have a lot more to learn and a lot more guests to have on. Like I definitely don't feel like we've even nicked the surface of what we need to be doing.
Lauren's just excited that I learned to clean with cleaning supplies like Branch Basics.
That actually changed his life, thank God, because he used to drink Windex for breakfast when he was little. So now he cleans with Branch Basics. I didn't
drink Windex, but
he like allows me to call hotels and places that we stay and do non-toxic cleaning supplies. He doesn't use cologne anymore. He switched his hair stuff to non-toxic. He's really made big strides. Now I got to get his boxers to cotton.
I already have cotton boxers.
Okay, we don't need to give
too much information right now.
The polyester's got to go.
You guys are cracking me up. I want 2 episodes from each of you that people need to listen to. Like it could even just be like Couch It to Lately. I know you have 400 episodes, but 2 from each of you guys.
I think that any of the ones we've done with Robert Greene around human nature and attraction and all
Agreed.
of that are good. We did a really good one with Rob Dyrdek, which I think people like, they know him from maybe television, but they don't realize how savvy and smart that guy is, not only with his time, but with his family and his life. I think if you were to start with Robert Greene and Rob Dyrdek on our show, like those would be 2 great places.
I totally agree with Robert Greene. He's my favorite author and he's amazing. I go back and listen to those episodes, and I'm not really someone who goes back and listens to the podcast, but Robert Greene, I will. He's incredible. The Brian Johnson episode's incredible. The Gary Vee episode is incredible. They both just really, really shined on a mic.
People like when we have Ed Milet and Andrew Huberman and Peter Attia.
And go listen to Amber's.
Like Amber's, yours was great. I mean, it's like, but it's funny when I say someone like Robert Greene, like we've had a lot of, I guess, big name guests on the show, but I was the most starstruck by him because I'd read his books for so long, and it was weird sitting with the author and who'd been been in his head reading his books and him in mine. And like, it's just weird moments like that.
Well, you think that he writes all these books on human nature, and you think that he's evaluating you while you're interviewing him. So there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Those are good ones though to start with.
You mentioned you've had Tommy Lauren, you've had Chelsea Clinton. Have you had pushback about these guests, and what does that look like?
Of course.
Total. But you know what? I have to be honest with you, and I don't know if you feel like this too, Amber, because you've been in the space for so long. I'm to the point where if there is a controversial episode, I don't even read the comments. Pushback to me is a part of the gig. If you think that you're going to put yourself out there on a platform and gain followers and gain people who love your work, and you're not going to get pushback, you're being delusional. It's part of the game. And what I've realized is if you love all the other parts and you love reading the good parts, you got to be comfortable with the bad. It comes with it. But yeah, we get pushback all the time. We just got pushback for an episode because we asked questions about kids' vaccines, and people, are uncomfortable with that topic. We asked questions. And I think that that's the pushback is usually projection. What I've noticed, it's mostly projection. But my recommendation to anyone who's putting themselves out there, just don't read it.
Well, here's the thing. As content creators, if we wanted to be quote unquote strategic, it would be much easier to grow a much bigger audience if we were to pick one base, left, right, whatever it may be, and just completely pander to that base over and over and over, and completely, disregard and try to upset the other side. Like it's a very, to me, a lazy form of content creation to just pander. We try to have conversations, and I don't want to say stay in the middle because we're definitely not in the middle on every issue, but we try to listen to both perspectives, which I think is a much harder thing to do, especially nowadays, and get a well-formed opinion based on different perspectives. And I think people don't like the idea these days of being able to talk across the aisle to both sides or both different kinds of conversations, because they almost want you to pick a side in any kind of debate or any kind of argument. And Lauryn and I are just unwilling to do that until we get more facts. And so for us, I think it's a much harder thing to actually sit down and listen to people that you may disagree with and try to form a different opinion. But that's what we're interested in. Like if we were lazier, we would just pick a group of people that thought one way and just constantly talk to them and rile them up and, piss off another base. But I just think that's it's lazy form of content creation and very uninteresting.
Taking a quick break because we are fresh out of LTKCon 2024, our 12th year of LTKCon, and we launched so many products. I know many of you work for brands and creator marketing. Many of you are creators yourself. And so I wanted to give you a quick scoop on what came out. For brands, we launched a suite of AI tools. This dashboard has never been better. You're able to do everything from, gifting and seeding product to small creators and doing codes all the way up through seeing your full campaigns and creator performance through our LTK 360 dashboard. Get with your brand manager, check this thing out. Everyone on your marketing team should be able to plug in and get what they need from creators and have a more efficient marketing experience. On the creator side, be sure that you've updated your creator app because our LTK Copilot is automating a lot of the processes that you used to have to do and acting as your assistant for other things. So for example, we're now automatically tagging the products that are within your post. We're doing other work to send the right message to the right people who follow you in your community. These are driving major impacts for both our creators and our brands. And if you're a shopper, thank you for being here. We hope that you're loving the new video experience in the LTK Shopper app. Download it, update it on all app stores. Earlier, you mentioned that people stop podcasting after, you gave the example of after 50 episodes, which candidly to me does feel like a lot of episodes. You guys have had more than 200 million downloads on your podcast. And so I'm just curious, was there a moment, was it the 50, was it the 100, was there a moment where you saw this tipping point of the podcast is taking off, or a certain guest, or what did that trajectory look like to get to the 200 million?
To me, there's been no eureka moment. There's been no moment like that. I think it's just constantly building slowly and consistently. And putting your head down and doing the work. I wish that I had a better answer than that, but that's how it's really just been consistent, disciplined work.
Well, I'll give you maybe a different perspective. Obviously I have the perspective of doing the show with Lauryn on our show and seeing those numbers grow over long periods of time. But I also have the perspective of running Dear Media and seeing other people do shows. And it's always interesting to me when someone starts a show for maybe 6 months or a year and it's not where they want it to be financially or from a, downloads or analytics perspective, and they quit in that first year. And then I watch other shows that stick with it for 2-3 years and start to have this exponential growth curve. I think podcast audiences or show audiences in general are savvy and they want to stick with people who they think are in it for the right reasons and for the long term. And I always tell creators, if you're just doing this just to make money or just to gain an audience in a quick period of time, you're in the wrong space. It's very competitive. But what we've seen over time is, our show, it exponentially grows because, we did that episode with you so many months ago, but that show will continue to get listens for years and years as new listeners or viewers come in. And I think about it just like compounding wealth or compounding, a stock portfolio. It's one of those things that starts really slow, but over time it just builds and builds and doubles and triples and quadruples. But yeah, you got to put in the time. And I think that's like anything else. You've built a business. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes long period of time and typically much longer than people give time for.
Let's transition to Dear Media. What is Dear Media?
Well, it's funny. I guess the Trojan horse for Dear Media was audio. People on that are not so familiar or just learning about it maybe think it's a podcast network. I've never thought about it as a podcast network, and I've never wanted to build a podcast business, which is strange. I looked at audio, these shows, as a cornerstone to build brands and commerce opportunities and live events and basically IP in what I consider to be new media. And what we thought at the time was that audio in general was an underpriced attention asset and an underpriced medium to get into, where people just really weren't paying that much attention to it, but where we saw so much engagement. So we started Dear Media primarily focusing in the audio space, producing podcasts. Those have now obviously turned into podcasts, vodcast, videos, audio, both. We're in the live event space. We've invested in 8 to 10 different commerce businesses that we use or that we use the network to promote on or to use the network to promote those businesses with. And I look at it as just a modern media company that has its hands in different digital channels, including audio, video, social, you name it, live events, IP, subscription content, commerce. And it's just this flywheel that we created catering to a very specific audience, which in our case happens to be Gen Z and millennial female audiences. And to date, we produce close to 80 shows. I don't know if that's the greatest explanation for it, but it's more than just audio and podcast.
How do you decide which podcast or what talent to bring into the Dear Media network?
Categorically at this one, we have so many shows. We actually look to the audience to see which gaps we're missing. So one of the things that comes to mind is we started a show with a woman named Dr. Eliza Pressman, who's one of the more prominent child psychologists out of New York. And the reason we did that show, she had little social presence when we started it, but we realized we had a lot of new young parents listening to the other shows. And we said, okay, there needs to be something for those parents to help navigate what it is to raise young kids. So we started a show called Raising Good Humans with her. And then we'll categorically look and say, okay, maybe we're missing something in wellness or fertility, or maybe we need some more comedy, or whatever it may be. We just started a show called Diddle on morning routines and daily routines of high performers, and we go to the audience and say, like, what else are we missing that they're looking for, and then try to plug the gaps that way with talented hosts.
And I screenshot a bunch of things and send it to you.
Yeah, and Lauren scouts for me.
I love it. She's a great scout. What were some of the early challenges you faced in getting this platform off the ground? Because we noted that this started really before podcasting was a common household activity.
Well, there's so many things. I think in the beginning, we just didn't believe in the medium. I remember like having to convince so many partners that we now have, like just on the viability of these shows as channels, right? Like people just didn't understand. I mean, we'd have to go around and convince people why this was worth paying attention to. Now you go on any social app and you can't not see people speaking on a mic, right? Like rewind 2018, there was very few people that were doing this visibly and that, brands believed in. I also think getting the talent agencies and managers and just the talent in general to trust us as a platform, and that they would be in good hands using Dear Media as a partner. In addition to that, like COVID happened. Obviously there was social and civil unrest where it was very difficult conducting a media platform, market downturns. There's been so many different things, but I think any entrepreneur, any operator sees the silver lining in any of those times and sees the kind of gaps, and that's what makes a good operator. And so we just kind of like one foot in front of the other kept going and saying, okay, like what could we do differently that maybe others aren't doing?
Is there a recipe for a successful podcast or a way that you coach your talent?
I know this sounds very cheesy, but like there has to be authenticity. You have to be uniquely yourself. I always tell people, if you're trying to be the next version of something that's already great, that already exists, you're just a second-rate version of that thing. And what I always tell people is the audience is coming for the host, not the guests. I think a lot of times people get in the podcast space and like, oh, I'm going to get all these great guests because I have this great network. And like, that's part of it. But the audience, those people get interviewed by great people all the time. So the host really has to develop their own personality and get the audience to resonate with them and engage with them and come back for them, and then want to be there because of the conversation that host is going to have with that guest, not the other way around. You don't want to be reliant on big names to build a show.
Do you think it's like launching a new social media account?
I think that why he was talking, I'm thinking you probably have the same lens of when a creator comes to you and says, how do you stand out online? You probably say the exact same thing Michael says. I'm just guessing. And I think that with a social media account, we're in a day and age where like you really have to have that unique perspective. And I hate when people are like, it's too oversaturated. No, it's not. We're dealing with the world. It's not too oversaturated. If that's a reason that you are saying you're not launching, that's an excuse that is getting in your way. I think it's very similar though with a social media account. You got to have that unique perspective. I also think you have to refine as you go. So meaning like if you say all the time, maybe like change that. If you are talking about the same thing over and over, maybe change that, bring some talking points. I think it's really important to sort of like monitor and edit and listen back. And I think that's the same with a social media account. It's editing and pivoting.
I think one advantage for us here at Dear Media, and this is something that we think about all the time, is we've been very disciplined in working with and looking to long-term assets and long-term hosts. Like we've been very good at not getting caught up. And like whenever people say like, hey, what do you predict is the next viral trend or this viral? I have no idea. I paid almost no attention to that stuff. I try to look at it from the lens of like, what is still going to be relevant 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years down the line. And so we've been able to place bets and do things with that perspective. I think similar to what you've done with your business. Like I very rarely play in the what's in the next 3 to 6 month window, even to the next year. I'm trying to think like what is going to be valuable and a real asset down the line. And because of that, we've been able to be disciplined in the people we choose to work with.
What do you think is up next in the future, the 1 to 3 year future for Dear Media?
Well, like I said earlier, I think people are going to start to look at all of these shows as just shows. We're going to stop calling them podcasts or vodcasts or whatever. It's like these are just modern shows and media, right? Like you're going to start to see other platforms, legacy platforms, start to struggle more and more. You're already starting to see that. Even we're in a time where there's a lot of stuff going on politically right now. And I was just looking at the analytics that's going on X compared to what's going on some of these mainstream platforms. And like, these are real numbers. And I think people are going to start to look to these creators as their own channels, and they're going to start to cherry pick, which channels you quote unquote turn on and off. And I think that's going to be really interesting because real IP and real brands are going to be developed from these individual channels or channels as a whole. And it's just going to shift the way that consumers not only get their information and their entertainment, but also choose to decide what they're going to engage with from a commerce perspective. So that's like already, you've been on the forefront of that for so long. You've seen creators do that. It's going to happen more and more, but these channels and these creators are going to become the new NBCs, the new Foxes, the new, like just in themselves. And I think that's going to be interesting because there's such a wide assortment of channels to choose from. No longer is it like the big three. You're going to be able to choose from thousands and thousands, if not millions of these channels.
So you mentioned earlier, of course, you have your podcast. We were talking through Dear Media. I'm sure everyone knows the Skinny Confidential like product line, the blog, the YouTube channel. You guys have quite a few businesses today. Like, how would you describe that breadth of businesses? Like, what are they? What all are you guys working on?
I think that just to break it down, like in layman's terms, we have our podcast, our show that we come together and we do 3 times a week. And then I have the Skinny Confidential product line, which is what I'm primarily working on day to day, which is a lot of it, as you know, just not shown on social media because I'm on calls all day or I'm making internal decisions or having meetings. And then Michael is the founder of Dear Media and he works on that primarily.
I look at it as 2 buckets. Like there's the entertainment bucket and I guess like the media bucket, which is what we're doing on the podcast and what we're doing on the social channels. And if we're doing speaking engagements and stuff like that, quote unquote, as entertainers or media personalities, right? And we monetize the same way that other creators and media personalities do in those different spaces. And then I think there's the main businesses which we run day to day, which is I'm the CEO of Dear Media day to day. I run that company with the entire team there and produce all the shows and invest in the commerce opportunities that Dear Media invests in. But my main gig that I do every day is show up as CEO of Dear Media. That's my quote unquote, that's like my job, like the thing that keeps me busy throughout the week. And then I think for Lauren, like to her point, she her main priority is her product line and the business that she's built on the commerce side, and she runs that with a separate team. And I think a lot of people think that we do all these things together, but while we're married and obviously consult with each other all the time, like she has a separate team, I have a separate team. We come together on the media stuff, but then separately we run the businesses with completely independent teams.
So I did a quick search on some of these businesses. So Skinny Confidential, of course, is on LTK. We saw that LTK posts with Skinny Confidential products are up 71% year over year. Top products, the ice roller, caffeinated sunscreen, and mouth tape. And then I looked at your community side, Lauren, of, who's following you, what's happening over there. On that side, you guys have 5 times as much content out this year as years prior. You're driving sales to over 100 different brands. So truly curating the best for your community there. These are not small tasks, managing a huge team of creators on the one hand from your brand, and then on the other side, actually creating and drawing your community in. I'm curious, as you guys kind of delegate, how do you do that? And who all are like your key people to make this go? Because certainly my experience is that I can't do it all. And so I've had to learn over the years to delegate in order to, run in all of these different lanes the way that you guys are.
I am a big delegator. I am someone who I have to slow down to speed up. And I know that. And just taking the LTK part out of it for a second, I actually was inspired after I spoke at the LTK con by the creators in the audience. There was, I think there was like 200 or something creators that were making over $1 million a year each. And I was like, oh my God, I don't think that I personally have paid enough attention and put enough of my energy towards linking everything I'm wearing. So I got connected with Ansley, who's on your team. She used to be our personal assistant, and she has just really helped me to grow the account. And what I do is I take pictures of my outfits every day in the mirror, and I will tell her exactly what I'm wearing and exactly what my skincare I'm wearing is, and I'll send it to her. And we've gotten in this rhythm where she already knows the skincare I'm wearing. She already knows the makeup brands I like. And so it's a really like fluid, just really nice relationship because it is so quick and efficient. And she's really helped me get those posts up. And I would recommend anyone who's listening who is a creator, LTK is one of those things that it's like podcasting. You have to show up day after day to really see results. And so I've really focused on showing up online and showing people exactly what I'm doing, what I'm wearing, what toddler recommendations I have, what hair recommendations I have, what my favorite products are of the moment, my Amazon finds. I have that all in LTK. So that's kind of my LTK team is Ansley, and then a girl on my team named Hillary, and we run that off text message, which is amazingly efficient. And then I am a big believer in hiring a right-hand man to manage your time. And for that, we have Katie, and she is someone who is in my calendar with a needle and a thread, who is making sure that every single minute of the day makes sense to be the most effective and efficient. And I think anyone who's listening that is trying to figure out a first hire, I think someone who manages your time is the most important person that you can hire. And as far as the other people on my team, we have 14 people on the product side, who are doing everything from social media to marketing to designing to creative direction to a COO. And then for the podcast side, we obviously have our producers and our video editors and people who are posting on social. But I do want to say that each of these people that we have hired have been strategic hires. I have not just hired to hire. And it's been people that we have methodically thought about hiring and made sure that there was a position for that.
Well, in high level, I think across all the organizations, there's probably close to 80 people now. So I don't want to sit here and be like, we do all this by ourselves. I think creators specifically have to ask themselves if they want to build a scalable business or if they want a nice income that they can manage personally without having the burden of, and I don't want to say burden of having to, like, maybe that's not the right word, but having to scale an enterprise value business, right? Which it's a very different thing. And I always tell people, like, listen, if you're making a great income and you have time with your kids and time with your husband, you can control your own schedule and you only have to answer to you, like maybe that's enough. It's changed over the years now when there's like my biggest stress in my life now is not what's going on with us personally, but I have to make sure that these these businesses that so many people are dependent on are sound, and that they're providing a stable environment for people's job security and for their income and for their family's income. And I mean, you know what that's like as an operator. Lauryn and I are really good at knowing that, okay, we are creating these scalable entities and it's what we want for our life. But I spend a lot of time with young creators or people that are just entering the space saying, like, is this really what you want? Like, do you want to turn something that you love into a business, which we've done? But in order to do so, you have to get out of your own way. So some of the first hires at Dear Media is like, I don't want to be dealing with every agent and manager and lawyer on the talent side. Like, it's my worst nightmare. I have enough with my wife as it is. No offense, Lauryn. And so I brought in a woman named Paige, who's Dear Media's president, and she has all those conversations. She does it much better than I do. My typical default when something gets difficult with a talent is like, just cut it and fuck the deal. Sorry for my language. And so like having her in there to say like, hey, Michael, you can't do that. Like, let's have a conversation and make sure that it's going right has been great. I'm more interested in like, what are we investing in next, and what's the marketing plan, and where's the business going, and what's a new outlet that we're not tapping into. And so, just like anything else, if you're going to start to scale a business, you have to almost put yourself out of a job consistently and bring in better people in areas that you're not strong in.
That was wonderful advice, putting yourself out of a job with the people that you are bringing in. And I often find, first of all, you talked about managing people. Managing people, I think, is you move out of the doer position and into the manager position, which is a shift and is something that people should be eyes wide open about. I know Baxter often, he's a fantastic CEO. He laments often not being able to be back in the engineering seat, back in the product seat, because that's his passion point. But we really need him in the CEO seat. But then I'm having a conversation the other day with someone else in a totally different industry, who was, again, kind of lamenting the need to scale and pushing back on it. And it's, you do shift at some point into that manager role, which is very different than being a player out on the field. Something else you guys touched on, I think is so important to draw out, is the value of a calendar. I was with someone else the other day trying to help them understand just like kind of the foundational pieces of moving into that manager type role. Again, different industry, but I think this applies across the board. And the first thing was honestly teaching them about a calendar, which sounds so like silly. People are like, oh, I get how to use a calendar. But for me, my assistant has changed my world by what Lauryn, you described as kind of like threading the needle of the calendar. You can do it whether you have an assistant or not. And that's color coding your calendar. So you know at a quick glance where your time is being spent. Is being spent in meetings and then in what type of meetings. How about with your spouse, with your kid? I calendar everything. I calendar my time with my children, my time with my husband, how much time I'm going to actually allow myself to brainstorm about a specific topic or to prepare for something. Because I think like most people, if you give me a week to prepare, I'll take a week. If you give me 1 hour, I'll do 1 hour and 15 minutes. I'll figure out how to get it done in 15 minutes. And so, planning ahead, I think, is so important for everybody.
One of the best things on the LTK app is that we get to have our own sales. And so we've rounded up a group of brands to have a special offering exclusive to you, our LTK app users. One of those brands is a creator-created brand called Dibs. I'm holding this product for you here if you're watching on YouTube. This Dibs product is called the High Road Highlight. I have been using this product on my nose, on my cheeks, on my clavicle, on my arms. It's kind of like Barbie in a little like box, honestly. I've had this for way too long. I just now pulled it out of my drawer. This is Courtney Shields. She's an LTK creator, recently launched this brand. She's in some pretty major retailers, and I can absolutely vouch for this product, and it's on the fall sale. So be sure you check it out.
You guys, of course, have been now in this game together for almost going on like 2 decades now. I'm so curious, like, I'm sure burnout happens for everybody. It happens for me. Everyone I've met has had some sort of experience like that. What are those things that keep you guys like engaged and so enthusiastically engaged in the game of business?
For me, it's the fact that I get to wake up and interview super interesting, compelling people. I mean, I never get bored of that. I love talking to people. I'm very curious. I have 100 questions. But I really have to get my hands in something and create, which is why the product line has been so incredible for me. And I love like taking something and making it, or taking nothing and making it into something. So I love taking something that maybe already exists, like an ice roller, but making it 10 times better, making it prettier, taking out all the pain points. So that sort of fills up my creative bucket, whereas the podcast fills up the conversation over sharing bucket. And then I think, Michael and I, we do a lot of strategy in our house. Like when we go to dinner, we like talking about business. When we go to dinner, we like talking about work in our kitchen.
I'm going to remind you that tonight when we go to dinner. Just
no, we
put
do.
That on the record.
I just don't like talking about work before 9 a.m. before I've had coffee and a workout.
Keep in mind she's a Gemini, so whatever she says, it could flip flop on a dime.
Yeah, you never know. I like to keep them guessing.
What are you?
I'm an Aries.
Aries aren't as fun. Sorry. What are you, Amber?
I'm a Cancer, so Gemini and Cancer go together really well. We'd have a lot of fun.
Our dads are both Cancers.
What's Baxter?
Gemini.
Ah, see? You guys love the Geminis.
No, for sure. I like that. It's like I don't know what I'm going to get next.
I like that tip that you said about color coding to see where you spend your time. Time is the most valuable asset you have. And if you don't have control over your time, I could literally tell if someone's going to be successful by how they run their day and their time. It's so important. I think one tip that really changed the game for me was the week before scheduling my workouts in the calendar first. So the workouts are first in the calendar, and around that is scheduled everything else. I think for me, like I have to have a workout to get clarity. So being a real practitioner of your time is important.
Yeah, I mean, I won't even, at Dear Media now, I won't, even if it's scheduled, I will not take a meeting with anyone internally unless there is an agenda in that scheduled time meeting. And what I've found out is, even if you're just like, hey, it's a 15-minute touch base, if you don't have an agenda with talking points before the meeting and people just show up like, what's going on? You just waste all this time with all this glad handing and personal talking. That's fine. There's a place for that. But I find that when we have a specific agenda and everyone's aware of it and it's calendared, everyone is so to the point and so efficient with the time, which is, like, I just think it's so important for people to think about like every minute as being valuable, because it's something we never get back. But to answer your earlier question about how I avoid burnout, or personally, I know Lauren answered a little bit, like I think for some people, their job is something they do to go through life in order to do other things that they love. And when I think about my job and the things that I do, is like, business is just the sport and the great hobby that I've chosen to play. And it's what gets me excited. That being said, at any given time, if the podcast becomes boring or something that feels like it's burning me out or dragging me down, or if Dear Media becomes uninteresting, I'll likely move on to something else. I'm not tied to this thing. It's like, oh, I've been building it for so long, I got to stick with it. I have to be interested and I have to be engaged, but also know that the challenge of building businesses and playing this game is what excites me in life. Like, there's no version of me that's one day going to go sit on a beach and relax. Like, this is what I enjoy doing. I like to take pockets in between to relax and kind of get away. But I think people that are starting to think about getting into an entrepreneurial endeavor, they have to decide, like, do you really love it? Or is this something that you're doing to chase some kind of end result?
True. On the calendaring side, I think one of the most, to me, learning how to say no was a radical thing. And now I just do. When people are like, oh, could I introduce you to so? I'm like, in fact, I'm not interested at this time. Thank you. And I try to be kind about it, but it actually just like, I actually don't have time. And people laugh because I think years ago, one of Baxter's high school friends was like, hey man, let's have lunch. And he was like, I don't do lunch. And they still laugh they're like, Baxter doesn't do lunch.
I mean,
he really doesn't.
It's hard to do lunch on a Wednesday at 12 when you've got kids. I mean, it's kids and you're working. Like,
now, with kids, I think one of the greatest things there's so many things, but we think about it from the perspective of, is it worth being away from our kids? And, we have our obligations that we need to do professionally, which if we commit to something, we're always going to show up and do it. And then the extra time with our family, with the kids, like, if it's not something that is so worth it to be away from our kids or miss bedtime, whatever, like, it's typically a no. And it thinks it makes it easy.
I'm comfortable now, though, with no. I'm comfortable with it. I'm good. Go ahead with what you were going to say.
My listeners have heard me say before that, one of the greatest lessons my dad taught me was yes to one thing is no to something else, and be sure you understand what's on both sides of the question. And oftentimes it is, the saying no to would be Baxter, or it would be my children, or just some free time. And so that one has been some of the greatest advice that I still continue to employ. My last one on the calendar piece was actually Gary Vee. And one of my first conversations with Gary, it was a 15-minute meeting. And there is nothing like pressure when you have 15 minutes to meet everybody on the call, get to the point, drive through. And it was highly productive. I'm sure he's been vocal about that in other interviews and stuff. But it's amazing how focused that you can be and how many things that you can fit in when you're maniacal about your time like that. And so like I said, whether you are a mother managing a household or you're running a business, I just think the calendar and putting those things down, I can't emphasize enough how transformational that has been. And speaking of transformational, both of us have made big life changes and moved across the country. You guys both grew up in California and now you live in Texas. What was the catalyst for that pretty tremendous move?
Well, I would start by saying we grew up in San Diego, which is very different from maybe the bigger cities in California, namely LA, San Francisco. And we grew up in an area, Del Mar, Rancho Santa Fe, where we had a lot more space and we're outside a lot more. And I think what happened was, and I don't want to speak for Lauren, she's going to have something out of this. When we were in LA and we had our first child and we were living in West Hollywood and like right in the heart of the city, obviously COVID and all those things happened. We just it was really simple, just thinking that we wanted our kids to be in an area that was maybe going to be more productive for their childhoods and where they could have a little more space, a little more openness, a little more safety. These big cities can be dangerous. We still visit LA enough, and, I don't want to shit on California too much because there's, we grew up there and there's still family and still businesses that are there. But we just felt as a family, it was better. Also, what I've found since being in Texas is I can never go back to a West Coast time zone. I love being in the middle. I love being only 1 hour behind the East Coast. I like being 2 hours ahead of California. I can have a whole day here and a whole morning before the office in LA even opens. And, I think we've been called to a place like this for a long time, and it just felt right after we had kids.
For me, I wanted to create a sanctuary for my family. I think Michael is aligned with this. And I just love how focused we are on wellness here. It's like today I cold plunge saunaed, I lifted weights, I was able to take 45 minutes to myself to go outside and meditate and read. We don't really drink a lot of alcohol here. If we do, it's like a good dinner at 5 o'clock. It's a very simple life with not seeing a ton of people, just putting our heads down, working. There's no distraction here. Yeah. And I think you have to be careful when you live in a big city because ultimately, and Amber, you know this, it can be incredibly distracting if you're trying to build something really big.
Here's the thing, and maybe people that are familiar with our platform will recognize this. We spend enough time in New York and LA where we're obligated to go for work, where we kind of get the things we need from there, but being in those environments all the time, 24/7, inundated with all of that and everything that's going on all the time. We've never been healthier since we've been here. And we look at this as a little bit of an escape and a sanctuary to kind of get away and reset. Also from a social perspective, we're on a mic 2 to 3 times a week, every single week. So we get so much of that kind of social interaction. So this is a place for us to kind of just recharge and be well and not be obligated to a bunch of things. Everyone always screams out taxes like that. Yeah, that's a byproduct that is nice, but it definitely wasn't the main deciding factor. And I think how we describe Texas for us is this is where we live, and this is where we're well, and this is where we're with our family, and where we can get away from all the other things that we're obligated to be around, in our professional lives.
I always say LA is my mistress. So I go there, I have sex with her, and then I leave and we get out. I think that you do have to be careful though, as you gain any kind of success, you are going to get more opportunities that are unique, that are hard to pass up, but not necessarily opportunities that are in line with the goal that you're building. So meaning, because you have a certain platform or because you've built a certain business, you'll get an invite from, I'm just making this up, but a politician to go to dinner. And it's something that it really isn't in line with what you set out to build, but it's an interesting opportunity. There's something nice about removing a lot of those to actually focus on what the goal was from the beginning. So the distraction element for me is the most important thing. It's removing that really allows me to get focused on self-care and wellness and my family and building what we've set out to build.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say is Lauren and I, for the first, especially when we first met you, we've done the big city rat race. We've done it for years, and it was productive for us at times. But I think now with young kids and building a young family, it's just not the environment we want to raise our kids in to begin with. Maybe I actually don't see us ever going back to a big city to live permanently. But there's plenty of time to experience those kind of things later.
You never know.
Never know. Probably not.
Yeah, no, there's a season. You guys have articulated honestly my experience and the why we are here in Far West Texas. to a T. It's there's the endless opportunity. I feel like I couldn't say no to enough things. And there were things that were interesting, like you mentioned. There's a politician's dinner. There's one of my good friends hosting a charity fundraiser. It's somebody's 40th birthday. There's always something going on, and it just kind of robs you of your time. And I think as a creative, I've realized that I really need quiet and space in order to create. And my days are entirely filled with meetings, like probably most people, whether it's meetings or, whatever type of work, you're occupied in that, and then needing the space at the end of it. And then, being able to go back to those things, like the way that you described, Lauren, is like, there's definitely certain things that I need cities for that I do in cities, but then I get this other end of the spectrum in my life to be there. So I'm happy that you guys have found that in Texas. And it also sounds like your health journey has evolved. I know you guys are very highly intentional. I'm inspired very much by that, Lauren. Baxter is on his cold plunge sauna workout era. I am slowly creeping towards that. I got in up to my hips the other day. I'll count that as a win.
Can I give you the best tip that someone gave me that changed it for me? It's not physical. It's mental. And you are someone who's so mentally disciplined. Don't tap into the physicality of it. Tap into the mentalness of it. So look at it different. You're cold, but you need to use your brain to tell you that you can do it, and forget about the physical. Like it's a very mental thing. For me, it's all I look at cold plunging as is building mental toughness. It's not, I don't even sometimes look at it for the benefit of the cold therapy. It's building my mental toughness muscle.
Okay, question, because over the last year and a half, I have now straightened out all of my deficiencies and everything else when it comes to hormones. And I was actually really scared to get my organs in the water, because I was like, what if this disrupts everything I've just worked so hard to organize? Do you think that is a real risk?
I'm obviously not a scientist, but I can tell you that I did 4 minutes yesterday straight. I did 11 minutes the day before, like broken up, and I did 12 minutes the day before that. I'm in the cold all the time. I thrive in it. I have had nothing but positive experiences from it.
I think well, first, Lauren's like wild in that thing. I can't do what she does in there, and
I love it.
And she's like, it's crazy. But I think it's more about what she's saying is it's just this thing where you start to do harder and harder things every day, and you just know you could do it, and it basically takes the stressor out of the everyday life, and it makes it like, okay, like if that's the hardest thing you're gonna do, everything else becomes easier. And I think I was talking to somebody the other day, and I think one of the greatest fallacies of humankind is that people are just constantly seeking comfort, and it puts us into this lulled state where whenever we get out of that comfort, we start to spiral. But if you do these kind of hard things day in, day out, then when real life stressors hit you, you can manage them much better. So that's why we like doing those things.
That makes total sense to me. I like the mental game, because the physicality is definitely less interesting. I just want to be healthy and toned.
But
right. I know you've switched a lot of other things. Go ahead.
No, it's just even like from I think at this stage of our life, again, as we're older, the workouts, the colds, the sauna, the eating stuff, like all of this, like the mental part of it comes first. And if the byproduct is you get more fit or more healthy or you look better, like great. But I think finding a greater purpose in doing these things for just mental clarity, or, for me, it's like being able to pick up my daughter for as long as I can, like that kind of stuff. That's the reason I like to do these things. And if the byproduct is you look better, great, but it's not the main reason anymore.
I also think like all three of us are in a marathon right now. We're not in a sprint. And when you're in a marathon, there's a lot of things you have to do to prepare. And like I said earlier, you got to slow down to speed up. So if that means canceling a meeting so I can go sauna, cold plunge, and take a walk around the block, and I'm going to show up 10 times better on my next 10 meetings, that's what it means. I'm someone who very much is like a tortoise rather than the hare. Like I will be slow and methodical and take step by step.
I know you've switched some other things lately too. Like what are some of the things that, like for example, I think you're getting goat's milk now. Is that right?
I love goat's milk. I love raw milk. My kids drink raw milk. I'm obsessed with it. I have raw chocolate milk, but I also get like raw cheese. I'm really passionate about eating whole, real food in its real, original state. And I've noticed so many beauty benefits from it. My hair is almost to my butt. My hair used to be up to here. I could not grow it. I've noticed skin benefits, and I've just noticed that I feel better and have more energy. And it's because when you eat something raw, it has all those vitamins and minerals and enzymes that it's supposed to have, and it's in its natural state. And I think that we've gotten away from that a lot. So I am someone who's very, very passionate about the raw industry. I get a lot of hate for that.
I think again, this move, and I don't think it needs to be, it doesn't need to be as drastic. I mean, we literally move states completely, but I think if you're in an environment and you're not happy in that environment and you're maybe not where you want to be in life, there's something to be said. I know not everybody can do this. I'm not preaching for everybody to just up and move. People have jobs and families and obligations. But if you have the ability to maybe change your environment, whether that's, even moving down the street, for us, it was a drastic move, but it completely changed our life. We were not living a healthy lifestyle when we were living in LA, and we had some great times there, but the difference in where we are now compared to then is night and day.
It's the intentionality piece.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, my last question to you guys. Y'all both do so much work. It's so exciting to watch and be a part of and be able to participate in. That's one of my favorite things about what you guys are doing, is that it's all stuff that we can dive into. And what would you say you're doing it for? Where are you going, or what's the goal?
I am doing it because if I can add value to people's life every single day with little tiny tweaks, that makes me really happy. And it goes back to why I started the blog in the first place. I started a blog and I wanted to pick people's brains so I could get those little hacks, those little tips, those little tricks that people could use throughout their day and create habits with that make a big difference overall. So I think for me, it's just continuing to have those people on the podcast that can give us those free tricks, tips, and also creating products that you can put into your routine that maybe upgrade your routine.
I'll give you selfishly and selflessly. Selfishly, like I said earlier, we get to stretch where we are. We get to kind of push beyond the limits that I think we all set for ourselves. What I find interesting as a human is going past what you believe your potential is and continuing to raise that bar further and further, not just from a financial perspective, but, can you get healthier? Can you get smarter? Can you get better? Can you, build a bigger thing? And I think continuously challenging yourself is what makes me excited about life. Like I said, there's no end goal where one day you're going to reach this and then you're done. It's just, I think continuing to see if you can push further. And then selflessly, I think, like I said earlier, Lauryn and I are super passionate about not only taking these lessons and applying them ourselves, but having the audience learn them with us and having them change their life and their potential as well. I think one of the greatest things about doing the show and what we do together is hearing all the messages from people that have changed their lives or, gotten healthier or gotten to a better relationship or built a better business or, created a better lifestyle. And it feels good when you're putting stuff out that, we believe is productive for the world. I mean, it depends who you ask. Some people may say some of the stuff we do is not productive, but I think the high majority of the messages we get from our audience are people writing and saying wow, I didn't know that, or I didn't see that, or this helped me improve here, or my relationship got better, or hey, I listened to this with my husband. And I think those kind of messages are very rewarding. And so I think that's the thing that keeps us motivated. If it ever started to not feel that way, I think we'd probably both move on to a different challenge, but that's where we are now.
Lauryn and Michael, thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to get to be your friends and to get to have a seat on both sides of this table now. And I feel like I'm walking away with so many great tidbits from today. So thank you for your time and for being on More to Say.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for coming on our show. Thank you for coming on my blog back in, who knows, 2000, I don't even know, 18? Who knows?
Longer, maybe longer.
Longer. We loved it. Thank you, Amber.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. It took every ounce of my being to not try to interview you during this. I'm not used to being on this side.
You can listen to More to Say on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And I'd love to hear from you. Share your comments and questions in the reviews section, or you can reach out to me at Amber Vinsbox on LTK, Instagram, and of course, LinkedIn.